Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're looking at a truly remarkable set of sources you've sent us, all centered on one story, the true account of Kamila Sidiqi.
Right. A young Afghan woman who, against all odds, launched and then scaled a pretty significant business.
And she did it during the most repressive years of the first Taliban regime in Kabul, a tailoring operation of all things.
And this is so much more than just a business success story,
Yeah.
It's really a masterclass in resilience, in strategy, and how to operate under extreme conflict.
Exactly. So our mission for this deep dive is to move past that generic narrative of victimhood that we so often hear about that era.
Yeah, and instead, really get into the granular details. We want to understand how women who were driven by absolute sheer necessity managed to engineer not just survival, but actual enterprise.
In a system that was, explicitly designed to crush them.
Completely.
And the author who found this story, Gayle Tzemach Lemmon, her own journey to find it is fascinating. It's almost like a detective story in itself.
It really is. She started out as a high-profile journalist,
Right.
covering presidential campaigns, that sort of thing.
And then she just pivots. Dramatically, she goes to Harvard Business School, not to become, an investment banker like most of her classmates.
No, her goal was completely different. She wanted to shift her entire focus to international development.
And specifically to finding these hidden stories of working women in war zones.
It's a very conscious choice to really disrupt the standard narrative.
Mm-hmm.
She started her research in Rwanda.
This was just a decade after the genocide.
And she immediately hits a wall.
Mm.
The prevailing belief, the one championed by international aid officials, who are, by the way, almost all men,
Of course.
was that Rwandan women were only involved in, small-scale microfinance, maybe selling some fruit on the side of the road.
Which to her just sounded way too tidy. It felt incomplete.
So she went out and just proved that assumption completely wrong.
Her reporting, it quickly uncovered women who owned and managed large gas stations.
Hotels, too. And even the women selling fruit, they weren't just subsistence farmers.
No, they were coordinating entire supply chains.
Exporting avocados and bananas to European markets.
Twice a week.
Exactly. These were sophisticated operations that were just being totally overlooked.
So that groundwork really set her expectations when she finally arrived in Kabul in 2005. She was looking for proof that, economic ambition existed outside of that NGO framework.
Right. But just arriving in post-conflict Kabul, that was a profound shock in itself, even for a seasoned journalist.
You can really feel the sensory overload in her writing. She lands on this raw winter morning, and she'd spent hours before the flight trying to prepare herself culturally, swapping her Boston outfit, the turtleneck, the leather boots for the required modest attire.
Oversized black pants, a black shirt.
And then there was a headscarf.
Yeah, a friend from Harvard had loaned her this thick, black wool headscarf.
And she just struggled with it. She describes having to drape and redrape it a dozen times, feeling completely awkward. She called herself a goofy foreign duckling fumbling among the local swans.
The physical act of just trying to conform was immediately a challenge.
And then she steps out onto the tarmac at Kabul International Airport, and she's hit with the atmosphere, the smell of charred winter air.
Thick with fumes from decades of war and, really poor quality fuel. It was a city that was just struggling to breathe.
And the traffic. Wow, the traffic was a story in itself. She called it a cacophonous free-for-all.
Try to picture it. You've got these taped-together cars sharing the road with donkeys pulling carts.
And then these high-end UN SUVs with darkened windows.
Fuel-towing bicycles weaving through everything, and crutch-bearing amputees all fighting for the same space.
And no traffic lights.
Virtually none. Just a few overwhelmed police officers trying to govern what she called an urban Wild West.
But the real challenge for her wasn't the traffic. It was finding the story she knew had to be there.
Right, because despite all the officials, both American and Afghan, championing the success of new businesswomen, her contacts kept leading her to the same place.
Women running international NGOs, which are, fundamentally dependent on foreign funding.
They're not self-sustaining, profitable companies. So her deadline is approaching, and she's starting to worry that she'll have to go home with that same well-trodden narrative.
The relief, she writes, was just palpable when she finally found Kamila Sidiqi.
Because Kamila wasn't just a business owner. She was this young dressmaker turned serial entrepreneur who started her entire operation as a teenager.
At the absolute height of the Taliban's repression.
That was it. That was the gold standard story she had been searching for.
And this brings us to the core insight, the thing that really anchors this entire deep dive.
The established narrative, the one that most foreigners looking in accepted, was that Afghan women under the Taliban were just silent and passive prisoners.
Basically waiting out a prolonged house arrest.
But the reality, as Kamila's story just so powerfully proves, was profoundly different.
So many women facing absolute economic necessity after the male breadwinners were, displaced or killed, they had to find an income.
They were turning, as the author puts it, small openings into large opportunities. They were inventing ways to thrive in a totally collapsed economy.
And their activity, it sustained their families. It kept the entire society from just completely collapsing.
We're talking about women who staffed foreign NGOs that focused on women's health, women who taught in these clandestine underground schools.
And women like Kamila who launched home businesses that provided that crucial difference between survival and starvation.
And they did this all through their own ingenuity. This wasn't about foreign seed money.
Not at all. So to really understand the sheer necessity that drove all this, we have to rewind.
Back to September 1996, the month the Taliban arrived, and the entire social contract was just violently shredded.
That month, Kamila had just graduated from the Syed Jamaluddin Teacher Training Institute. She was at the very peak of her academic ambition.
Her whole plan was laid out. She was going to enroll at the Kabul Pedagogical Institute, which was a co-educational university, to become a professor.
A professor of Dari, or literature. This was a young woman who was ready, totally ready to step into a professional career.
And we really can't stress enough how quickly that rug was pulled out from under her. To get the shock, you have to understand the Kabul she grew up in.
Before 1992, Kabul was an incredibly liberal city, especially by regional standards.
Oh, absolutely. Many women wore Western clothing, heads uncovered. In the 1970s, you had Kabul university students who were famous for wearing knee-skimming miniskirts.
And even after the Mujahideen takeover in '92, which did mandate modest clothing headscarves, baggier clothes women like Kamila still found these creative ways to show their style.
She was a master of what they called sartorial limits.
Right, wearing these fashionable, pointy, low heels that were just visible under her floor-length coat.
They maintained this undeniable air of modernity, even in the middle of a civil war with escalating modesty rules.
But in September 1996, the rumors spreading through the family networks were different. This wasn't just about political change.
No, this was about a total social restructuring. They'd already heard about the schools for girls being shut down in Herat.
The message was crystal clear. Education and employment for women were the first targets.
And Kamila's father, Woja Abdul Sidiqi, a longtime military officer, a real patriot, he reacted to this threat by just reinforcing his core value.
He had 11 children, 9 of them girls. And he always said, "I look on all of you with one eye."
He just fiercely believed that education was absolutely critical. For their future, for the country's future, it didn't matter who was in power.
But the threat was just too immediate to ignore, and the arrival of the Taliban was swiftly and brutally enforced.
Which is perfectly illustrated by the terrifying experience of Kamila's older sister, Malika.
Malika was pregnant at the time, and her 4-year-old son, Hussein, was desperately ill. She had to get him to a doctor.
It was a necessity. But the new rules were already in place, and Malika didn't own the required full chadri, the burqa.
So she improvised. She used an oversized chador, a large headscarf.
And she describes trying to manage this heavy, unfamiliar fabric, just struggling to keep it in place while she's carrying her sick child and trying to rush through the streets.
The streets were unnaturally silent. She said the sound of her own heels clacking on the pavement just magnified her fear.
But the defining moment, the one that changed everything, came when she got to the doctor's office.
She saw 3 turbaned men Taliban soldiers, some wearing that black kohl eyeliner, and they were viciously beating a woman in the street.
With those brutal wooden batons, the shaloks.
The woman was pleading with them, crying out, "We never had to wear them before."
And the men are just shouting that they believe in Sharia, and then they delivered the new law. Women must be covered. This is your warning.
The violence was sudden, it was swift, and it was designed to be public. It was terrifying. It was meant to enforce the Chaudhry rule immediately.
And that one incident cemented the new reality for a whole generation of women in Kabul who had grown up in that post-1950s era of voluntary unveiling.
Now they were being forced to adopt a way of life that was completely foreign to their urban culture.
Imposed by rulers who saw their previous freedom as an unacceptable sin.
And the Taliban's power wasn't just random violence, it was institutionalized, right?
Immediately, they installed the Ministry for the Promotion of Virtue and Suppression of Vice, or Amr bil Maruf wa Nahi al Munkar.
A ministry that was explicitly modeled after the one in Saudi Arabia.
And you had these passionate foot soldiers, many of them barely older than teenagers, who'd grown up in refugee camps, patrolling with leather whips and batons.
They were enforcing this one singular, unforgiving interpretation of Islam, heavily influenced by the puritanical Deobandi tradition,
Which rejects things like music and mysticism. And it was blended with local Pashtunwali.
We should probably pause on Pashtunwali for a second. It's crucial context.
It is. It's this ancient, non-religious tribal code of honor and ethics, common in Pashtun society.
So by marrying this tribal code, which often stresses female seclusion and male protection, with their strict religious interpretation,
The Taliban created a legal framework that was extremely rigid and very localized. The religious puritanism was reinforced with cultural dogma.
and the core edicts that came out of that were devastatingly simple.
Women will stay at home,
Women are not permitted to work.
and women must wear the chadri in public.
The economic and social impact was instantaneous.
40% of civil servants vanished overnight. Over half of all teachers were gone.
And this was just catastrophic for the estimated 30,000 families in Kabul that were reportedly headed by widows.
Right. They'd lost their husbands in previous conflicts, and now they were barred from the workforce. They were trapped between the law and starvation.
You also have to understand the soldiers' mindset. Many were young orphans, veterans of refugee camps in Pakistan.
And they saw cosmopolitan Kabul as this corrupt, sinful city, a modern-day Sodom and Gomorrah.
Something that needed complete spiritual cleansing.
Exactly. They saw the city's previous culture as an amoral temptation that had to be stamped out.
So given that atmosphere, the family had to make some hard choices.
Kamila's father, being a Tajik, decided to leave for his hometown, Gulbahar, because of the increasing harassment of young Tajik men suspected of aiding Ahmad Shah Massoud's forces.
And his son, Najib, soon followed, heading toward Pakistan to find work.
Before he left, Mr. Sidiqi gathered his daughters. He looked right at Kamila, his most academically ambitious child, and gave her this solemn charge.
He said, "I don't think this will be over soon. It may even take years, but I am sure you will be a good leader for your sisters."
So Kamila, who was barely an adult, was now officially in charge of the family's welfare, both spiritual and physical.
And with the men gone and the threat outside being absolute, Kamila and her 5 sisters entered this period of profound confinement.
Their university dreams just evaporated. And that enforced idleness, that restlessness, it quickly turned into this deep, consuming despair.
They tried to find purpose in the only way they could, reading. Kamila, ever the academic, organized a neighborhood book swap with friends.
A semi-regular book swap, yeah. Cycling through their small libraries to fight off the boredom.
But this small activity became this really crucial act of cultural resistance.
It did. Because they deliberately focused on Persian mystical poets like Rumi and Hafez.
Whose poetry is lyrical, it's humanist, and it often speaks of spiritual longing and the idea that tyranny will eventually pass.
And that choice was highly intentional. The Taliban's puritanical Deobandi interpretation of Islam rejected mysticism. It rejected music, any kind of personalized spiritual expression.
So by focusing on Rumi and Hafez, who celebrate the beauty of the human spirit, the women were maintaining this intellectual and emotional connection to the cosmopolitan Afghan culture the Taliban was trying to erase.
They found real solace in lines that reassured them that this too would pass.
But poetry, it doesn't pay the bills.
Not at all. And meanwhile, the economy is collapsing, relying almost entirely on subsidized foreign aid.
Kamila is watching her family's savings, their small rental income, just dwindle. The money for 8 people wasn't going to last.
And that fear of starvation, it was a much, much stronger driver than the fear of the shallok.
So that anxiety is what propelled her into action. She started looking for economic loopholes in the rigid new rules.
She observed Dr. Mariam, the woman who rented their apartment for her clinic.
And she noticed Dr. Mariam was allowed to practice as long as all her patients and all her staff were female.
Right, as long as she adhered to the segregation mandate. So work was possible if you operated within those very restricted boundaries.
Then came the key market insight. She visited the Lycée Miriam Bazaar.
And she saw that even with the economy in free fall, women still needed simple clothes, dresses.
The demand for basic apparel was constant, but there was a problem in the supply chain.
A huge one. Male tailors couldn't take women's measurements, and male shopkeepers had severely restricted contact with female customers.
The whole system for female clothing had broken down. It was a massive market failure.
And Kamila saw the opening. If women could produce clothes for women, they could completely bypass that male-dominated, regulated marketplace.
The only problem was Kamila, who had focused her entire life on academics, didn't know how to sew.
So she had to turn to her older sister, Malika, the expert seamstress.
Kamila, taking a deep breath, walked that short distance to the bus stop alone. Without a Maram, her heart was just pounding.
She found Malika reeling. She'd lost her teaching salary. Her husband's transport business was failing.
And Malika, despite being terrified, she recognized Kamila's desperation, her determination. She agreed to teach her.
But Malika was the cautious one, and she immediately laid down the first set of operational guidelines for their new underground business.
These were non-negotiable rules, based entirely on maximizing their operational security.
They established the blueprint. Rule 1, never go out alone, always be accompanied by a Maram.
Their younger brother, Rahim, was designated as the chaperone.
Rule 2, never be on the streets during prayer time. That's when the patrols were strictest.
And crucially, absolutely no talking to strangers, especially shopkeepers who could draw unwanted attention.
The risk was immense, but so was the necessity.
So Kamila, with Rahim, her trembling Maram, by her side, took that first hand-stitched blue dress to the bazaar.
The tension must have been just overwhelming. She approached a shopkeeper named Merab, knelt down pretending to examine the dresses he had on display.
All while managing to keep her hands steady on the counter as she quietly explained that she and her sisters were tailors looking for orders.
There was a scary moment. A large, blue-clad figure approached, and Kamila froze. Merab. He recognized the market opportunity, and probably her desperation.
He placed an initial order, 5 pantsuits, shalwar kameez, and 3 dresses. He handed Rahim the fabric and the instructions.
But then came the moment of real strategic brilliance.
Merab realized that every woman in a chadri looks identical. He asked for her name so he could recognize her next time.
And Kamila, without a single hesitation, spontaneously gave him a false name.
Roya.
That simple alias. It wasn't just smart. It was a highly sophisticated use of operational security. It was regulatory arbitrage, in effect.
By creating Roya, she protected her own anonymity from neighbors, and she protected Merab, the shopkeeper.
Exactly. If the Taliban ever questioned him, he could honestly say he didn't know the real identity of the woman he was doing business with.
It was a preemptive legal shield baked right into their market strategy.
Her brother, Rahim, was so proud of her quick thinking, he almost laughed. He called her a very good saleswoman.
And the financial impact was immediate. That first delivery earned them enough money for a week's worth of groceries and flour.
Kamila realized the demand was scalable, so she immediately sought a second customer, a man named Ali.
Ali's shop, Sadaf, sold the kind of long, wide-legged clothes that were perfect for the new Taliban-era fashion requirements.
And Ali, who was a refugee himself, his family was also struggling, he placed a much larger and way more challenging order.
This order included 3 elaborate white wedding gowns,
which was a major technical leap. It demanded high-level stitching, beading, skills they were just learning.
This just highlights the enduring power of cultural rituals, even under extreme repression.
Weddings were still happening. They were somber affairs, sure. No music, no dancing, but the need for a new, beautiful gown remained.
Kamila was capitalizing on a stabilized demand for a basic cultural necessity.
And Malika, the reluctant teacher who was now the expert seamstress, was just completely inundated with work.
She was working 14-hour days, often trying to tend to her prematurely born twin babies right there at her workspace.
The success was immediate, but the workload was just completely unsustainable.
And this is the point where the venture shifts. It goes from being a survival mechanism to a scalable business model.
They'd hit a production bottleneck. Kamila knew they needed to expand not just their headcount, but their management capacity, their quality control.
Their first hire was a woman named Sarah, a widow whose husband, an engineer, had died suddenly,
leaving her to support 3 young children, one of whom was disabled.
Sarah was uneducated in the formal sense, but she was an absolute expert with a needle and thread.
But more importantly, Sarah was a natural manager.
Kamila saw that right away. She realized Sarah could handle the rigorous quality control. She could supervise the production floor,
which would free Kamila up to focus on what she was really good at: marketing, planning, expansion.
And for Sarah, that income was transformative. It brought her respect from her in-laws. It stopped her from feeling like a financial burden.
And this realization led to the genesis of the dressmaking school.
Kamila realized their 2 central talents were production and education.
And the idea was just brilliant in its simplicity. teach women tailoring skills, provide them with immediate work through production, and grow the business's supply chain at the same time.
It was a self-funding training pipeline. Students paid no fee during training, which eliminated that financial barrier.
But they would immediately contribute to the business's production. The length of their training just depended on their skill and their commitment.
Her brother Rahim, he worried about the workload. The girls were already pulling all-nighters.
But they all knew they desperately needed the help. This expansion wasn't just for the business, it was for the community.
But safety had to be institutionalized. They'd learned that painful lesson when Malika's previous Quran school was shut down after the girls left in a group and attracted a patrol.
They needed to move beyond those initial rules and create a rigorous, enforceable code of conduct.
And Sarah became the chief enforcer of these very strict school rules.
Which were all designed to make the women completely invisible to the Ministry of Vice and Virtue patrols.
Rule 1. You must wear the full chadri. A veil was provided if you didn't have one.
Simple attire. No white shoes. That was forbidden because white was the color of the Taliban flag. No nail polish.
No loud talking or laughing in the streets.
And never talk to men other than a mahram on the way to or from the house.
This wasn't just compliance. This was using the enemy's own rules as a form of camouflage.
Exactly. By adhering to the segregation rules even more strictly than some devout households, they were effectively minimizing their risk profile.
And the model worked beautifully. The school just exploded with demand in the spring of 1997.
It started with 4 girls and quickly reached 34.
It drew in young women who were desperate not just for income, but for a sense of purpose.
Women like Nasha, a refugee working 2 jobs, and Manaz, who had dreamed of being a university professor.
And Manaz is such a fantastic case study of the school's dual impact.
She had this unique gift for delicate beading and embroidery, skills that added tremendous financial value to the dresses.
And because of that consistent income and the skills she gained in Kamila's living room, she was able to persevere after the Taliban fell.
And she eventually achieved her dream. She became a university professor.
Kamila wasn't just employing women, she was securing Afghanistan's future intellectual capital.
And here is where the story gets even more complex. The business received surprising, discreet support from within the Taliban itself.
This is a truly fascinating detail.
A local Taliban member named Mustafa, his daughters actually attended the school, sent a quiet message to Kamila through his daughter Masuda.
And the message was explicit, but guarded.
He said, "She should please be careful to make certain that no men come to the house. Ever. I will try to let her know if any of my bosses are asking about her business."
Wow. That's implicit local protection.
It confirmed that their rigorous adherence to segregation was earning them a kind of respect, a kind of tolerance from local commanders.
Who understood that women supporting their families, as long as they did it invisibly, was a necessary evil for societal stability.
The strictness of their own rules, paradoxically, was the source of their freedom.
And the ultimate confirmation of this came with the Taliban wedding.
A family urgently ordered 6 plain dresses for a wedding happening the next day. The girls worked all through the night.
They later learned from their young helper, Neelab, that the cars waiting outside to pick up the dresses included dark Toyota Hilux trucks.
With Quranic verses painted on the side. Unmistakable Taliban vehicles.
The simple, plain dresses they had made were for a Taliban wedding party.
Kamila and Malika realized they weren't just being tolerated. They were an essential part of the new economy. Professionally supported by the very men whose edicts had forced them indoors.
It was such a bizarre realization. Kamila apparently joked, "At least we know some of the Taliban like our work."
So at this point, Kamila is confidently pushing the business forward. She's using their earnings not just for survival, but for investment, for capital expansion.
She invested strategically. She bought an expensive embroidery apparatus from Pakistan, which let them charge a premium for specialty dresses.
And crucially, she bought a small generator so they could maximize those unpredictable, fleeting hours of electricity.
Production could now continue regardless of the state-run power grid.
And her internal leadership was now matched by this mastery of external risks.
There was one high-stakes occasion where she confronted a vice and virtue patrol at Ali's shop.
Thinking fast, remembering her own security training, she managed this 20-minute standoff by claiming Ali was her cousin.
And then deferentially praising the Amr Bil-Maruf's work for keeping the city safe.
She learned exactly which words and expressions satisfied the soldiers. It was a blend of humility, religious deference, and this quiet confidence in her mission.
This incident really shows her transition from a scared student into this polished negotiator, fluent in the rhetoric she needed to survive.
Meanwhile, the harassment of men was intensifying. Kamila's father returned briefly, deeply proud of his daughter's great work.
But he confirmed he was leaving for Iran to join Najib. The security risks were just too high.
Soon after, Mrs. Sidiqi also left, leaving the girls completely on their own in Kabul, fully independent.
Then, in 1998, this massive opportunity arrived, one that would test the ideological foundation of their whole operation and her relationship with Malika.
Kamila was approached by Mahbouba and Hafisa from UN Habitat, the UN Center for Human Settlements.
They were expanding a program called the Women's Community Forum, and they asked Kamila to help run home business projects in District 10.
Sewing, knitting, carpet making. The proposed salary was only $10 a month.
Which sounds negligible, but that $10 represented something far more valuable than cash.
It was access. It was professionalization, leadership experience outside of just tailoring.
And Kamila, who had never seen herself as just a tailor, saw this as the ultimate growth path. She'd get training in bookkeeping, help manage the nearly $10,000 provided to fund each new forum.
UN Habitat was really adept at operating in this gray space. They were engaging women in infrastructure programs despite the explicit Taliban ban.
And they did this by getting discreet support from local mullahs and registering officially as an Afghan entity. It was risky, but it was legitimate.
But Kamila's excitement was immediately crushed by Malika's intense anger.
This wasn't just a disagreement. It was the central ideological rift of their entire journey, survival versus ambition.
Malika feared the most brutal consequences of working with foreigners. Prison, detention, or worse, punishment for the family men who were abroad.
Her motivation was protection, risk aversion. She saw the tailoring business as this safe, internalized ecosystem. The UN meant exposure.
And she tried to appeal to Kamila's sense of duty. She offered to financially support Kamila entirely if she just dropped the UN idea. It was a sincere gesture of love and fear.
But Kamila refused. She clearly defined her personal destiny. She said, "I was never meant to be a tailor, you know that. It's the business and the management that I'm good at. I have to think about my future."
She stood her ground. She said her faith would protect her and that what she's doing was for the greater community.
And then, tragically, she vowed that if she was caught, she would not ask Malika for help. It created this devastating rift between them.
But Kamila took the job, and she began work that required constant high-stakes travel.
She and her colleague Nuria started moving mostly on foot between different community forums under the constant threat of patrols.
They relied heavily on their decentralized network for warnings. Student families would tip them off, sometimes forcing them to hide silently on a drafty floor while a Talib knocked outside, demanding to come in.
That constant fear was the price of her ambition.
And the single biggest test of her composure came with the Jalalabad bus incident.
She, Hafisa, and Seema needed to travel to Peshawar for training, but it required crossing the Jalalabad checkpoint without a maram.
An act of extreme defiance. They took a massive risk and asked a terrified male passenger in their row to pose as their uncle.
The atmosphere on that bus must have been incredibly tense, everyone's eyes glued to the road as they approached the checkpoint.
And when she was confronted, Kamila knew she couldn't just plead ignorance. She relied on the negotiation skills she'd honed at the bazaar.
She maintained this veneer of deferential calm, insisting they were just a family visiting relatives.
She wove this plausible lie, claiming their missing brother, the Maram, was delayed and would meet them with their luggage.
The confrontation lasted 20 excruciatingly tense minutes. Kamila maintained eye contact but kept her voice low, using words of religious respect to placate the soldier.
Her composure held until the soldier was distracted by a tip about another family playing a forbidden videotape. That sudden diversion allowed them to proceed.
It wasn't logic that saved them. It was quick thinking, institutional knowledge, and a stroke of luck.
But the reality of that danger was confirmed soon after. Their friend and colleague, Wasma, was arrested for teaching.
And she sent a desperate warning from prison through contacts. Kamila had to stop her work immediately.
So Kamila had a choice: revert to the safety of the tailoring school, or forge ahead, relying on the faith that had sustained her so far.
And she chose ambition. Her willingness to take that risk for skills, for connections, it shows the difference between simply surviving the Taliban and actively preparing for a future without them.
As Kamila was navigating these personal risks, global events were rapidly shifting the geopolitical landscape.
In September 2001, Ahmad Shah Massoud, the last major anti-Taliban leader, was assassinated, reportedly by al-Qaeda affiliates posing as journalists.
That immediately heightened tensions. It signaled the Taliban's complete dominance just before the international blowback.
Then, of course, came the 9/11 attacks in the U.S.,
cementing Afghanistan's role as the primary target for retaliation because of the Taliban's protection of al-Qaeda and Osama bin Laden.
Panic just gripped Kabul. Kamila's home in Khair Khana was terrifyingly close to major military targets, the airport, a fuel depot.
Neighbors were urging Mrs. Sidiqi to evacuate before the American bombs arrived.
But Mrs. Sidiqi, perhaps echoing the risk assessment lessons her daughters had learned, refused to flee.
She prioritized the safety of her daughters inside their home over the risk of bandits and kidnappers on the roads. She said she would leave it to God's will.
So the aerial bombardment began. The family learned to live with these tense, candlelit evenings in their windowless bedroom, listening for the distinctive sounds of the jets.
Raheem and the girls became experts in identifying American warplanes. B-52s, F-14s. They became sorrowfully familiar with cluster bombs.
And yet, even in the middle of this terrifying military campaign, the human need for entertainment and culture and business found a way to surface.
In a truly strange fashion, Titanic fever swept Kabul.
It sounds completely absurd, but bootleg VHS tapes of the Hollywood movie were being smuggled in, sometimes hidden in soup pots.
The repression had created this desperate demand for escapism.
The Taliban scrambled to fight this wicked influence. They outlawed the Titanic haircut and cakes shaped like the ship.
They even arrested 24 barbers for giving young boys the Leo look. But they couldn't stop the consumer demand.
Kamila, ever the businesswoman, just observed this. She saw entrepreneurs rushing to rename the market in the dried Kabul riverbed the Titanic Bazaar,
plastering the film's name and images on storefronts and taxis.
She apparently remarked to Raheem, now that is marketing. It was proof that demand, if it's strong enough, will always find a way to bypass repression.
On November 13, 2001, the war came to its symbolic end. The Taliban abandoned Kabul.
The girls, I'm sure if it was safe, hid in the crawl space under Dr. Merriam's office, listening to the muffled sounds of celebration outside.
The change was immediate. Radio Sharia became Radio Afghanistan again, and it started broadcasting Farhad Daria's iconic song Kabul Jan, beloved Kabul.
The sound of music, forbidden for years, ringing out openly, it symbolized the return of freedom.
And Kamila recognized this moment as a golden chance for Afghanistan.
Women like her, who had experience running businesses and working within the international system, were suddenly in extremely high demand.
She transitioned immediately to working for Mercy Corps, the global aid organization.
Her task was to set up women's centers and train women in literacy, vocational skills, and microfinance. She was adept at bridging that cultural gap between the foreign consultants and the Afghan women they were trying to help.
But Kamila never truly loved the NGO structure. She realized that while her high salary was great for her family, it was fundamentally dependent on foreign funding cycles and politics.
She wanted to return to the job creation model she had perfected during the Taliban years. So she wanted to build something permanent.
Something that created self-sustaining jobs for others and secured Afghanistan's long-term future.
Her brother Najib, who she had helped support abroad, named her new construction and consulting company, Kuwain, after an ancient dynasty known for its glory and good fortune.
And Kuwain was a massive undertaking, far more ambitious than tailoring. Her vision was to institutionalize the resilience she had learned.
They trained mobile teams, men and women, in sophisticated business skills, planning, marketing, profit and loss analysis.
This required overcoming immense challenges in post-Taliban Kabul. No reliable power, shattered transport links, corruption.
But by focusing on mobile teams, they could deploy these services across Afghanistan, Pakistan, and even India. It was a genuine regional reach.
And this was all driven by Kamila's profound belief, developed through years of struggle. Money is power for women.
She recognized that income leads directly to respect, security, and decision-making power in the family.
Her ultimate goal was rooted in stability. She wanted to train women who never had the chance to study so they could pay for their own children's education, securing the next generation.
And the success of her initial underground venture is what allowed her sisters to finally fulfill their own academic dreams.
Saman earned a degree in literature. Layla completed university. And Malika, the one who had feared the external risk the most, she earned her degree, raised 4 children, and resumed custom dressmaking with Saman.
Their father, Mr. Sidiqi, remains an ardent supporter of girls' education, just immensely proud that all 9 of his daughters are educated.
And Kamila's work not only sustained them, it funded the university degrees of both of her brothers, fulfilling her promise and cementing her role as the true leader of the family.
Kamila's journey is it's such a powerful counter-narrative. From ambitious student to forced confinement to secretly starting the systemically important business under a terrifying regime, and then becoming a national leader.
The risks she took wasn't just for her physical safety. It was the calculated risk of providing knowledge, purpose, and financial opportunity for so many other women.
And what's truly illuminating is the strategic nature of her entrepreneurship.
It wasn't about being disruptive or high-tech. It was about identifying a desperate, constant need income, purpose, basic clothes, and building a scalable, resilient system to meet it.
The tailoring school network.
And she did it by rigorously adhering to the very rules that were designed to suppress them. That operational ingenuity, adapting to those restrictions while still growing, that is the real enduring lesson here.
It's a testament to the idea that necessity is the mother of invention. But in Kamila's case, it was also the mother of enterprise and the architect of an underground school that provided hope when the formal system was outlawed.
Which leads us directly to the critical reflection for today.
Kamila and women like her, they now face a different, perhaps more insidious anxiety.
They fear that the international community, eager for a political deal, an easy exit from Afghanistan, might once again use their rights as the price of security.
The right to work, the right to education.
Exactly. This cycle of risk, progress, and potential abandonment is just heartbreakingly apparent in her story. Kamila consciously moved from the temporary structure of foreign aid at Mercy Corps to the permanent structure of local, self-funded enterprise with Kuwait.
Because she understood the impermanence of international goodwill.
So what does this profound grassroots resilience teach us about how international powers should truly support vulnerable communities? We see that locally developed solutions, like Kamila's business model, are often far more durable and scalable than large aid initiatives.
So the ultimate challenge for you, the listener, is to consider this. When the political tides inevitably turn, how can the global community empower local leaders to build structures that are so resilient that they no longer have to fear their rights being negotiated away for a temporary truce?
That question lingers long after the first Taliban regime falls, and it remains the central challenge for Afghanistan's future.